I have strong doubts about being the ideal husband. My job is highly stressful, and sometimes I come home in a grumpy mood. I may not be the best provider, but we manage just fine. We have a comfortable home, 2 luxury cars, my wife has a wardrobe full of beautiful clothes, and our 8-year-old daughter Jennifer has countless expensive toys. At the end of the day, I am just a hardworking man who loves his family dearly. My wife Linda and I have been happily married for almost 12 years. Yet in the past couple of months, something has felt off between us. It's difficult to pinpoint, but she has been acting strangely and distant. Without any apparent reason, she finds fault in my words and actions, which is completely unlike her. When I tried to address the issue, she dismissed it, claiming to be tired or having a bad day. Initially, I thought I should give her some time to sort things out. However, as time passed, her detached attitude became increasingly frustrating. Besides affecting our closeness, a troubled relationship with your spouse impacts every aspect of your life. I've always put in effort to keep our love life exciting and spontaneous. In the past, surprises like bringing home a bouquet of roses would lead to passionate and fulfilling nights. But lately, my romantic gestures are met with mere gratitude and a peck on the cheek. It feels as if she thinks I am trying to compensate for something I have done wrong. It has been weeks since she initiated any closeness, and my advances are met with disinterest or the classic excuse of a headache. On a rare occasion that she agrees, she remains passive, leaving me to do all the work. With time, I realized that I was mentally detaching myself from the situation. When I would come home, I would focus on playing with my daughter and paying as little attention to my wife as possible, unintentionally making things worse. I started feeling desperate, so during breaks at work, I would go over everything in my mind. I tried to recall if I had done something to trigger the change in Linda's behavior, but couldn't come up with anything. I played multiple scenarios in my head, attempting to analyze cause and effect. The more I thought about it, the more the unthinkable explanation kept resurfacing. Could my wife be cheating on me? I continuously told myself that it couldn't be true, that she would never do such a thing. However, curiosity got the better of me. I started reading about the signs of infidelity, looking for differences in behavior, attire, and schedules. Honestly, I hadn't noticed Linda dressing provocatively or paying more attention to her appearance. But then again, I only see her after work. Who knows how she dresses during the day? I also had no knowledge of her schedule, as she always seemed to be running errands. What were these errands? Again, I had no clue. However, some of the symptoms matched her change in attitude. The thought of hiring a private detective crossed my mind, but without concrete evidence, my suspicions were not enough to justify the expense. Thus, I took matters into my own hands and conducted my own investigation. My activities included calling the house randomly during the day and discovering that she was sometimes home and other times not. I discreetly installed an old external surveillance camera beneath the garage eaves, connected to a hidden tape unit behind some paint cans. The objective was to spot any unfamiliar cars at the house. However, after 2 weeks of monitoring, no such cars appeared. I observed Linda leaving the house a few times, claiming to be home all day. Though the duration seemed too brief for any significant rendezvous, it could also be explained as minor errands she didn't feel were important enough to mention. There was no evidence of an affair. As time went on, with no concrete proof, my suspicions grew stronger. Her worsening moods and the absence of intimacy for weeks left me feeling frustrated. Approaching our 12th anniversary, I saw it as an opportunity to inject some excitement into our relationship. We arranged for our daughter to stay at my parents' house, so we could have an unrestricted evening together. I booked a table at Plato's, her favorite restaurant, hoping it would reignite the spark in our marriage. As the maitre d' escorted us to our table, I held on to hope for the rekindling of our old magic. However, Linda seemed a little on edge for some reason. She appeared to relax and revert back to her normal self after ordering a bottle of wine with dinner. Our conversation became lighthearted and playful. After the meal, it was clear that my beloved wife was eager to hit the dance floor. Despite suggesting trying out a new dance club in town, Linda convinced me to go to our usual spot, a charming venue with romantic lighting and a cozy dance floor that catered to an older crowd. The music was danceable, and I didn't need much convincing to join in. I must admit, I'm not a bad dancer myself, and our shared love for dancing was one of the things that brought Linda and me together. We secured a private table for 2, ordered drinks, took a sip, and then made our way to the dance floor to showcase more than just the two-step. It felt like old times, and we both had an amazing time. After dancing continuously for nearly an hour, we returned to our table for a short break. As Linda excused herself to the restroom, I couldn't help but admire her graceful hip movements, but I noticed that I wasn't the only one captivated by her charms. At a corner table on the opposite side of the dance floor sat a very attractive man who seemed to be attentively observing Linda's every move. For a moment, I thought I saw her make eye contact with him, which made me wonder if they knew each other. As Linda disappeared into the restroom, the man glanced in my direction with a smug look, although it was difficult to confirm from that distance. Seeing that the place was strictly a dance club, I couldn't help but wonder why a guy would come alone. I assumed his date was probably in the ladies' room, just like Linda. While I waited for my beautiful wife's return, I kept a watchful eye on him. As Linda walked past him on her way back, I was almost certain I saw them exchange smiles and glances. Suddenly, all my suspicions resurfaced. "Honey, would you mind getting me another glass of wine? This one tastes off," Linda requested as she sat down, already feeling a bit uneasy. I didn't like the idea of leaving Linda alone while I went to the bar to order, especially since it was crowded and the bartender was busy. Looking around, I caught the attention of a barmaid. I couldn't help but notice a hint of disappointment in Linda's eyes as the young lady approached our table to take our drink order. At that moment, I had a sinking feeling that the evening was taking a turn for the worse. Glancing back, I noticed the man in the corner still sitting alone. I decided to inquire about him, catching Linda off guard. There was a momentary panic in her eyes before she regained her composure. Sensing that I was onto something, I pressed her about the guy she seemed to be making eyes at on her way to the bathroom. She innocently denied making eyes at anyone, but as our drinks arrived, I saw her quickly glance over my shoulder. To my surprise, the man in question approached our table without even acknowledging my presence. He boldly asked Linda for a dance, and I immediately intervened, declining his request. This triggered a response from him, claiming that he was talking to the lady. I quickly retorted, asserting that the lady was my wife, and I would be the one deciding who she could and couldn't dance with. Linda chimed in, accusing me of being rude. Curious, I asked her if she knew the guy, catching her off guard. She hesitated for a moment before explaining that he was the person she had mentioned earlier. I expressed my frustration, stating that it was not just rude but extremely disrespectful for him to ask her to dance without even acknowledging me. The man tried to interject, but I shut him down, making it clear that I didn't need his input. Turning back to Linda, I continued by telling her that if he had asked if I would be okay with them dancing together, I might have considered it. But now, there was no chance. She responded with an edge to her voice, calling me silly and asserting that there was nothing going on between them. She reminded me that, although we were married, she wasn't my possession or slave. If she wanted to dance with someone, she would. I couldn't believe the level of disrespect my wife was showing me. It was unlike anything she had ever displayed before. I was furious, and any hopes of a romantic evening with her quickly dissipated. Despite my anger, I tried to control my temper as she continued to speak. Linda expressed her desire for fun, but her tone was much sweeter. I reminded her that it was our anniversary and that I wanted us to have fun together. Watching her dance with someone else was certainly not my idea of fun, especially after I had specifically asked her not to dance with him. I acknowledged that I didn't own her, and I couldn't prevent her from dancing with him. However, I warned her that if she did, she should have him take her home because I would be gone. After 12 years together, I could decipher Linda's thoughts effortlessly, and as she peered into my face, her expression conveyed rage, even though I found it surprising that she couldn't sense the same sentiment in mine. I brought up the impoliteness of keeping the gentleman waiting while we argued. Linda retorted, declaring that she would dance with him and save our discussion for later. The obnoxious man displayed a smug grin as he extended his hand for her to take. Linda placed her hand in his and they strolled towards the dance floor together. I left even before they commenced dancing, doubting they would even notice my departure. As I wandered 8 blocks away, my cell phone suddenly rang. In a remorseful tone, Linda inquired about my whereabouts. I mentioned that I was on my way home to pack a bag. She questioned why and where I was going. I responded that I did not have an answer yet but was determined to escape. I emphasized that I had reached my limit. Linda had expressed disbelief at my decision, underscoring that it was merely a dance, just a worthless dance. She questioned whether I intended to throw away 12 years of marriage over a dance. I clarified that it had nothing to do with the dance itself, highlighting my concerns about our relationship. I shared my suspicions of her potentially being unfaithful, particularly with the man she had just danced with. I pointed out the lack of respect he displayed, akin to that of someone involved with a married woman. Linda, her voice now softer, denied any wrongdoing and professed her love and respect for me. I challenged her, citing the absence of closeness between us for over 2 weeks, her detachment during our encounters, and her recent irritability. I accused her of not honoring my feelings, emphasizing her behavior that evening. The phone remained silent until she finally apologized. She acknowledged her actions, expressing regret for how she had behaved that night and for giving the impression of an affair. Linda admitted to noticing the man and exchanging glances while dancing, but insisted that it meant nothing. She pleaded for me to come back and pick her up. I refused, reiterating my decision to leave. I reminded her of my warning that if she danced with that guy, she would have to find her own way home. I informed her that I was pulling into our driveway, intending to be gone by the time she arrived. I suggested that if she was indeed having an affair, perhaps she should go home with the other man and forget about me. Linda pleaded with me, expressing her desperation and assuring me that she was not having an affair. She suggested grabbing a cab and asked me to stay put until she got home, emphasizing the need to have a conversation. Despite the previous tension, her tone had changed significantly. She begged for understanding before ending the call. I pulled into our driveway, went upstairs, and packed a bag. I left the house within 12 minutes. I wondered if she would really take a cab home or if the man would drop her off. So I drove down the block, turned off my lights, and waited to see. About 15 minutes later, a yellow cab pulled into the driveway. Linda got out and rushed into the house. I saw what I had anticipated, so I headed to a motel. Almost immediately, my phone began to ring again. I turned it off. I still had no concrete proof of infidelity, but my suspicions were strong. I was nearly positive that Linda and the man she danced with knew each other. I thought this might be the right time to hire a private detective. If I wasn't home, perhaps she would seek solace with her lover. The following day, I scoured the yellow pages and found a private investigator with an impressive advertisement. I went to his office and provided a retainer. Afterward, I went to work. Tracy, my secretary, urged me to call my wife immediately. She said Linda had already called 20 times and something was undoubtedly amiss. I explained that Linda and I were facing difficulties and I had no intention of returning her calls. I instructed Tracy to relay that message during the next call. I also called the receptionist in the front lobby, telling her not to grant Linda access to the offices if she were to visit. I wanted to give the private investigator an opportunity to uncover information. Now, it was simply a waiting game. Later that afternoon, our neighbor Andrea called. Although I expected the conversation to revolve around Linda, I answered to avoid appearing rude. Linda's friend, Andrea, initiated the discussion, explaining Linda's attempts to apologize and my refusal to speak with her. I affirmed that I had nothing to discuss with Linda. Andrea sighed softly, mentioning Linda's denial of any infidelity and urging me not to believe such suspicions. I admitted to believing that Linda might be cheating, citing her peculiar behavior for over 2 months and the events of the other night. Andrea questioned my assertion, as Linda insisted they only danced. I clarified that I witnessed them exchanging glances before the man approached our table, behaving rudely. Linda sided with him, and despite my warning, she danced with him. I expressed my suspicion that they were engaged in a romantic relationship. Andrea tried to calm me down, asserting that she had not noticed any signs of cheating and emphasizing Linda's admission of her mistake. She urged me to talk to Linda, insisting that avoiding the issue wouldn't solve anything. I acknowledged Andrea's point but requested some time to think it over. I asked her to relay the message that I would reach out to Linda in a couple of weeks. Andrea assured me that she would deliver the message and urged me to call Linda. After our conversation, I contemplated Andrea's words. Despite my doubts, I couldn't imagine her deceiving me. Over the next 2 weeks, I felt on edge, continuously checking in with the investigator who had no updates. Eventually, he summoned me to his office and handed me a manila envelope. Trembling, I opened it and followed his instructions to skip to the essential information on the bottom of page 5. Proof. Through an exhaustive investigation, his office found no evidence to support my suspicions of infidelity. I was left in disbelief. Unsure of how to react, I glanced up at the man across the desk. I inquired about the certainty of their findings. The investigator reassured me that they had monitored Linda's every move for the past 2 weeks, employing house surveillance, call monitoring, tailing her outings, and examining phone records and credit card statements. He conveyed that there were no indications of an affair. Overwhelmed with relief, I struggled to withhold tears in his office. The investigator advised me to return home to my wife and child, emphasizing the rarity of happy endings in his profession. Expressing gratitude, I left and made my way back to my motel room, needing time to process everything. Throughout the weekend, I scrutinized every detail. On Monday morning, I dialed Linda's number. She answered weakly and shakily. Introducing myself, I inquired about her well-being, expressing concern about her sounding unwell. After a brief pause, Linda apologized, expressing regret for taking me for granted. She acknowledged that I was right in warning the guy at the club, and started sobbing again, confessing her lack of respect despite her love and admiration for me. Linda begged for another chance, promising never to repeat the same mistake. Her plea caught me off guard, considering her attitude at the dance club. When I didn't respond immediately, she assumed the worst. "You're not coming back, are you?" she questioned. "Yes, I am," I reassured her, clarifying that it would be on a trial basis. I expressed my desire to have my original wife back, the woman I fell in love with and married. Linda insisted that she was here, eagerly awaiting the return of the man she loves. Skeptical, I mentioned the negative behavior, lack of passion and disrespect I had endured over the past 2 months. Despite her sincerity, I remained unconvinced. I informed her that I would gather my belongings from the motel after work and be home that night. After a moment of silence, she professed her love for me and apologized for her treatment of me. Linda expressed deep regret and emphasized her fear of losing me. I couldn't say that I didn't still have reservations, as I was still upset. And even with all the evidence suggesting otherwise, I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda knew that guy at the dance hall. After work, I retrieved my clothes from the motel and headed home. Jennifer came running and almost jumped on me at the door. She asked where I had been. I explained that I had been out of town for a while. She obviously knew nothing about our problems. Linda stood right there beside her. She put her arms around me and showered me with kisses. I passionately responded, kissing her back. In the end, I couldn't deny that I loved my wife. That was 2 years ago, and married life has since been wonderful. Linda is once again the woman I married, both inside and outside the bedroom. A few months ago, she threw me a surprise birthday party. In the past, we always celebrated Linda's birthday as a special day, but only began celebrating mine after my return home. Last night was our 14th wedding anniversary. This time, Linda planned the entire evening. When I returned from work, she surprised me with tickets to a dinner playhouse to see Man of La Mancha, one of my favorite plays. Later, we strolled along the beachfront, enjoying the moonlight and the gentle breeze from the lake. Expressing my gratitude for the wonderful anniversary, I wrapped my arm around her and brought her close. She playfully acknowledged the arousal she felt, to which I agreed that we should head home to address it. About half an hour later, we found ourselves in our bedroom, eagerly tearing at each other's clothes. Even to this day, I remain uncertain if she had been unfaithful. I will probably never know for sure, but I am glad I chose to come back home. Although spring had officially arrived on the calendar a few weeks earlier, it was only on this day that I could venture outside without my winter coat, signifying the end of another Chicago winter. Stepping outdoors, I deeply inhaled the lingering scent of morning dew from an overnight April shower. Memories of the warm, comforting embrace of my husband's arms flooded my mind, accompanied by the gentle rhythm of rainfall. As I made my way to the car, I couldn't help but admire the resilient blue wildflowers blooming in the lawn. Despite the harshness of winter, they persevered in their quest for a fresh start, a new lease on life. Every spring, my car radio would fill the air with melodies as I headed towards a charming coffee shop to catch up with Kathy, a dear friend I hadn't seen in quite some time. Our friendship had blossomed years ago when our children, Kathy's son and my daughter Jennifer, became fast friends during a school function. Since then, our bond had remained strong. As I strolled past the front entrance, Kathy, already seated at a cozy table in the corner by the window, waved and smiled warmly through the glass. Inside the bustling cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped me as I joined the line of eager customers, eagerly awaiting my cup of heavenly Colombian blend. Spotting me in the queue, Kathy rose from her seat, joyfully greeting each other with heartfelt giggles and a warm embrace before settling down. We reminisced about the times we shared, indulging in laughter over amusing incidents from past school functions. Conversation smoothly transitioned to our children, and together we acknowledged the swift pace at which they were growing up. An hour into our heartfelt conversation, Kathy leaned closer, lowering her voice. Playing along, I mimed locking my lips with a key, signaling her to proceed. Curiosity piqued, I inquired about the reason for the secrecy. Kathy confessed that she had been seeing someone, a man named Cody. She admitted the naughtiness of the situation but expressed a newfound sense of vitality in Cody's presence. Though she emphasized her fondness for him, Kathy feared that without deepening their connection, he might lose interest. In response, I probed her intentions, questioning whether she was willing to risk her marriage for a fleeting affair. With an impish half-smile, Kathy clarified that she had no intentions of marrying Cody. She simply desired a brief fling, describing it as the spice of life. Ensuring her husband, Bruce, remained unaware of her actions, Kathy pleaded for confidentiality, highlighting how his heart would shatter if he discovered her involvement with another man. She further noted that Cody was also married, urging caution on both their parts. For the past 2 years, I had concealed a secret close to my heart, sharing it with no one. But as I looked into Kathy's eyes, I made a decision to take a risk, recalling a difficult period when Harry, my husband, had temporarily left me. Kathy vaguely remembered the ordeal but confessed she had never known the details. I confided in her, stressing the importance of her promise to keep this revelation classified. Kathy, considerate of her own marriage's vulnerability, swiftly assured me of her discretion. As a waitress approached, pouring fresh coffee into our cups, I waited for the moment to continue. My voice lowered as I recounted the sense of stagnation I had felt in my 12-year marriage, an inexplicable boredom settling in. I mentioned the doubts that plagued me, questioning my purpose and direction in life. A feeling of being trapped overshadowed any semblance of joy. Kathy, attentively listening, interjected, understanding my plight as a woman. She empathized with the notion that many women experience similar emotions, stressing that it wasn't about lacking love for our husbands. Kathy emphasized her profound love for Harry but confessed that, inexplicably, something felt amiss. A sense of melancholy had crept in, casting a shadow over every aspect of life, including the intimacy shared with her husband. School functions, once filled with excitement, had become mundane. After taking a sip of coffee, I met Kathy's eyes, assessing her engagement in my story. With her full attention, I continued. Terry came into my life. With a subtle nod, I confirmed Kathy's inquiry about an affair, relieved to admit that it had remained an emotional connection without physical infidelity. A genuine sense of gratitude washed over me at the thought. I described Terry as a stunning man, possessing rugged good looks akin to Robert Redford. Sandy blonde hair framed his face, while piercing blue eyes captivated those around him. Standing tall over 6 feet, even his clothing couldn't hide the appealing physique he possessed. As I confessed my unintentional staring at Terry, I couldn't help but blush at the memory of his captivating smile. Flirting with each other awakened a thrilling sensation within me, an exhilarating, albeit wicked, experience. Eventually, I came to my senses and continued with my shopping down the produce aisle. Recapping, I recounted the encounter when I reached for some tomatoes and accidentally bumped into him. He greeted me with those captivating big blue eyes and a charming smile, saying, "Hi, Kathy." Uncomfortably, I admitted feeling a physical response, which embarrassed me. Hoping he wouldn't notice, I blushed and recalled the awkward moment. Despite observing my wedding rings, he extended his hand for a shake and introduced himself. Surprisingly, his awareness of my marital status didn't dissuade him from expressing interest, and I found it flattering that someone like him could be attracted to me. We continued with conversation and jokes as we moved through the aisles, gathering the items we needed. Upon reaching the checkout, he offered me his number, suggesting I call him for lunch the following week. Kathy was now hanging on every word of my story, expressing how familiar it sounded, almost prompting me to toss Terry's card away. As I left the store, my thoughts echoed, "Yeah, right. I'm going to call you and we're going to have this intensely hot romantic love affair, and then my husband will finish off us both." I admitted that I didn't throw his card away, but kept it in my purse. On the way home, my mind was consumed with thoughts of Terry. When Harry arrived home as I put away groceries, I already felt guilty and snapped at him when he tried to help. It seemed like an unconscious defense mechanism. Poor Harry asked if something was wrong. In response to Kathy's eager question about what I said, I confessed that I lied, telling Harry I was just a little tired from shopping. In truth, I was secretly walking on cloud 9. Continuing my narrative, I acknowledged that I knew I shouldn't call Terry, considering it was wrong and that I was vulnerable due to my emotions. Despite telling myself, no, I couldn't resist the temptation. I found one of the last payphones in the city and dialed the number on Terry's card. We arranged to have lunch the following day. With anxious anticipation, Kathy waited for me to take another sip of coffee before continuing. On our way to the restaurant, I shared with Kathy that my emotions were all over the place, terrified and excited simultaneously, not to mention feeling incredibly aroused. During our conversation, Terry reached over the table and held my hand, evoking that familiar wetness. It felt like being a kid on my first date. Despite a strong desire to go to bed with him, my conscience or perhaps fear held me back, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. In response to my sharing, Kathy noted that Terry persisted in his seduction, discussing Harry without recognizing the value of the woman he had and failing to appreciate Kathy. She admitted to being influenced by his words, leading to resentment towards her own husband. In a short span, Terry successfully convinced her that Harry was taking her for granted, resonating with the situation she believed she was currently facing. I explained my motive for sharing all this with Kathy, expressing a desire for her to be aware of the situation she might be getting into. Curious, I inquired if the guy she was seeing had begun talking about Bruce yet. Kathy shook her head, asserting that there were no issues in her marriage. However, in the brief pause that followed, I sensed a subtle uncertainty lingering in her words. Continuing our conversation, I probed deeper, asking if she too had started to question her situation. Kathy acknowledged the growing realization, prompting me to reflect on my own experiences. I explained to her how, when Harry left, he pointed out my constant irritability, which I had been unaware of for over 2 months. This pattern extended to the bedroom, where I found it challenging to muster passion for a man who appeared to take me for granted. As I continued with my story, I could see understanding slowly spreading across Kathy's face. I urged her to consider the situation and asked, "Think about it, Kathy. What kind of man has an affair with a married woman? Can you imagine Bruce doing it?" "Bruce? No, of course not. He'd never do anything like that," Kathy affirmed, seeking validation. I then questioned her, "So why risk your marriage over someone who would?" While Kathy pondered the recent revelations, I continued sharing my story. Anyway, we had lunch again the next week, and fidelity to Harry became increasingly challenging. By the third lunch, Terry almost persuaded me to go back to his apartment. Seeing his frustration with my excuses, I realized that another lunch might lead us to bed together. As we left the restaurant after that third lunch, I casually mentioned my need for a new dress as Harry was planning to take me out for our anniversary. I spoke of a dance club where we used to have fun, and Terry seized the opportunity. Arrogantly, he declared his intention to be there and dance with me, claiming it would teach Harry a lesson about my desirability. Despite my objections, he insisted it could make Harry appreciate me more. Kathy expressed disbelief and concern, asking if Terry had actually shown up. I confirmed that he did, revealing that I noticed him as soon as we entered the venue. Despite the awkward situation, I refrained from saying anything, not wanting to spoil the enjoyable time Harry and I were having. However, matters took a turn when Terry approached and invited me to dance. Kathy reacted with shock, whispering in astonished, "Oh my God." To worsen the situation, Terry completely ignored Harry and behaved rudely towards him. Understandably, Harry became defensive and issued an ultimatum, insisting that I couldn't dance with Terry. Stubbornly, I got angry and declared my intention to dance with Terry anyway. Despite Harry's warning that he wouldn't be there when we returned from the dance floor, I dismissed it. As we began dancing, I confronted Terry about his rude behavior in front of Harry, questioning why he had to act that way. Terry explained that he wanted to put Harry in his place, further fueling my anger. Despite Terry holding me close on the dance floor, my primary concern was that Harry was watching, and I feared his heightened upset. I was so preoccupied that I didn't even realize the first dance had ended, and we were already on to our second. When the dance was over, I told Terry not to ask for any more. I insisted I was going to spend the rest of the evening with my husband. On my way back to the table, I noticed Harry was following me. I confronted him, asking what he thought he was doing. He claimed he wanted to apologize to Harry. Upon returning to the table, Harry wasn't there. Terry sat down, stating he'd wait with me until he returned. I doubted he had any intention of apologizing. It seemed more like he wanted to toy with Harry some more. "Why?" Kathy asked. "Why would he want to do that?" I thought about it and concluded he must have figured that since he hadn't succeeded in getting me into bed yet, he'd create trouble between Harry and me. I was sure he hoped I'd turn to him for comfort, imagining he'd console me between the sheets. As the night wore on, I suspected Harry was in the men's room. I told Terry to go back to his table, but he kept stalling. When the waitress came over, he ordered us drinks. That's when she asked if we wanted to start another tab. I wondered aloud about the first tab, questioning its necessity. She explained that Harry had paid it before his sudden departure, leaving me stunned and feeling abandoned. As I narrated the events, Kathy's face mirrored my distress, and her own emotions began to surface. A solitary tear escaped from Kathy's eye and rolled down her cheek. Kathy voiced concern, suggesting we stop discussing it, given my emotional state. Despite her suggestion, I insisted on sharing the whole story, believing it was crucial for her to know. I continued, recalling how, in the aftermath, I reached out to Harry, urging him to return and pick me up. That's when he dropped the bombshell, suspecting an affair, particularly with Terry. Harry declared his intention to pack a bag, leaving me uncertain about his return. I reached for a napkin, dabbing my eyes as I explained to Kathy how the realization hit me with overwhelming force. It was as if someone had suddenly turned on the lights, bringing everything into sharp focus. I acknowledged that it wasn't Harry taking me for granted. Rather, it was me taking him, Jennifer, and our life together for granted. The weight of risking my entire marriage over someone undeserving struck me. Despite pleading with Harry to return for a conversation, he refused, leaving me with no choice but to call a cab. Kathy, curious about Terry's role in the situation, asked what he had been doing. I shared that Terry persisted, claiming Harry didn't deserve me and urging me to go home with him. I chuckled as I recounted telling him to drop dead. Even after that strong dismissal, Terry tried one last time. Outside, as the cab pulled in, he attempted to kiss me. In response, I swiftly delivered a knee to his groin, warning him of an inappropriate contact suit if he ever tried to contact me again. Kathy reached over, offering support as I wiped away more tears. Recounting the events, I shared how upon reaching home, I discovered Harry had left. My attempts to contact him were futile as his cell was turned off. The fear of my marriage unraveling and losing everything we had built overwhelmed me. It was the most scared I had ever been. Desperation led me to confide in Andrea, our neighbor, hoping Harry might open up to her. He did, but his only response was the need for time to think, promising to call in a couple of weeks. Realizing pressure would backfire, I decided to give him space, enduring what felt like the worst 2 weeks of my life. In the presence of our daughter Jennifer, I maintained a facade of strength, explaining that Daddy was out of town. Yet in moments of solitude, tears flowed uncontrollably. I feared I had irreparably damaged my relationship with Harry, especially if he believed I was unfaithful. In tears, I apologized to Kathy, finding it difficult to discuss even now. After a deep breath, I continued, sharing the painful journey. As I revealed the details, I emphasized how close I came to losing everything and how it made me realize the significance of what I had. Love, I emphasized to Kathy, had to surpass lust. The love between Harry and me was irreplaceable, and I considered myself incredibly fortunate. Kathy responded in a contemplative tone, expressing understanding and admitting she wouldn't know how to handle her husband leaving. When asked if I ever told Harry the truth, I explained that I couldn't risk it, given the closeness of losing him. Living in constant fear of him discovering the truth, I emphasized how I've tried to be the best wife since the day he came home. No longer taking him or our marriage for granted, I expressed gratitude daily and showed Harry my appreciation with passionate sincerity. Despite the lingering fear, I could only hope that my efforts would be enough if he ever discovered the truth. Kathy reassured me with a comforting squeeze of the hand, expressing gratitude for sharing my story and averting a potential mistake. Grateful for the conversation, we discussed tentative plans for our next meeting before parting ways. I felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing I had prevented my friend from making a regrettable decision. Upon arriving home, I had ample time to welcome my daughter Jennifer with a kiss and an after-school snack. Reflecting on how quickly she was growing up, I marveled at the passage of time, realizing she would soon be 10 years old. Time flies, I thought to myself. When Harry returned from work, I greeted him warmly with hugs and kisses. It struck me that I had never opened up about that painful period in our marriage until that day. Conversing with Kathy served as a reminder of the wonderful life Harry and I had built together. Later that night, Harry lay beside me peacefully asleep. I turned on my side, propping myself up on my elbow, and traced the lines on his face, each one telling a story of the years we'd shared. With a delicate touch, I followed the faint outline of a few, my heart swelling with love and admiration for the man lying next to me. Leaning down, I pressed my lips to his, and to my delight, his smile met mine. He pulled me into a passionate kiss, his arms wrapping around me. Whispering, I expressed my surprise, thinking he was asleep. Harry chuckled, revealing he had been deep in thought about Jennifer's upcoming birthday. When I suggested a baby brother or sister for her, it wasn't entirely unexpected. We had discussed it before without reaching a decision. His smile seemed to signal an end to that debate. With Jennifer's birthday just 2 months away, I playfully hinted at getting started. Harry's broad smile indicated he was on board. 2 months later, we celebrated Jennifer's 10th birthday with a big backyard party, inviting all her friends and ensuring plenty of ice cream and cake for everyone. After the festivities, we surprised our daughter with an additional lavish gift, the news of a new baby brother joining our family.